Welcome back to the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler, joined once again by my co-host, Sean Leahy. Sean, how's it going, man?
Tim's going great. Awesome to be here again, and super pumped about today's episode. Our guests, this is some things I have personal, deep experience with, and I can tell you this for sure that these guys are doing some yeoman's work towards solving a really tedious and serious problem with government software.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they're climbing some pretty large mountains here with some of the problems they're solving. Actually, a part of today's episode is about a venture firm that's stepping outside of their comfort zone and kind of making a bet in a space that it's typically not known for, which is the defense space. Kind of spoiler alert. But it got me thinking. When's a time in your life where you stepped way outside of your comfort zone and it paid off?
Well, I don't know if that's if I can think of the one off the top of my head. I mean, in the past year, I've retreated towards the mountains of Western Virginia to get more into my comfort zone. So that's a hard one to think of on the spot, Tim. But I am very happy that we are seeing folks like one of our guests today jump into defense tech and not having been let's say a native defense tech kind of investor, right? This is a very promising thing, I think, from a full national interest, national mission perspective. They're tackling hard problems too. So sorry for the non-answer. Sorry, but
yeah, we're just going to edit that out and put in something really cool. No, sure. I'd say any entrepreneur, right? I mean, you've gone out on your own, you've started something. I mean, any sort of entrepreneur is kind of, jumping out of that comfort zone. For me, it was, I moved to Indonesia, started my first business when I was 25 and probably about as far outside of my comfort zone as I could get. New country, new culture, trying to build something, from scratch, and failed after a couple of years, but it gave me a ton of confidence as an entrepreneur. And also, I'd say a much deeper appreciation for the comforts of living in the States, for sure.
Let me redeem myself here, Tim, and ask a follow-up question. What's the key to getting out of your comfort zone? What was your just do it moment?
For me, I had a mentor that pushed me. It was somebody that had kind of gone and done it previously, and we were colleagues, we were coworkers, and he would just kind of have me over to his place every day after work. And, eventually it was like, what do you have to lose? You're young, you got nothing, nothing to really, take you away. I wasn't married, didn't have kids. And, so he was a big influence for me. So I'd have to say, like, having a good mentor, having folks around you that kind of push you to go outside those boundaries was key for me. Cause I was comfortable.
If you can't take the leap, have somebody push you off the cliff. Sounds like a great plan.
Yeah, just get pushed. Cool. Let's give our listeners a quick preview of today's episode. So today we're going to be exploring how the open source software company Defense Unicorns is rebuilding the software backbone of the U.S. military, and why Sapphire Ventures, best known for commercial success stories like investments in MuleSoft, Box, DocuSign, made Defense Unicorns their first ever defense investment, which I just think is one of the reasons we wanted to bring these two guests specifically on, because it's such a unique scenario there. But we'll dive into how Defense Unicorns grew to nearly 30 million in revenue before raising a dime of outside capital, why Sapphire moved unusually quick on their investment, and what this partnership will signal, for the next era of national security innovation. So join us to break it all down. We've got two great guests. We've got Rob Slaughter, co-founder and CEO of Defense Unicorns, and an Air Force veteran who helped launch the DoD's pioneering Platform One initiative before founding Defense Unicorns. And alongside him, we've got Jay Das, president and partner at Sapphire Ventures, longtime venture capitalist, 2 decades of experience backing category-defining enterprise companies. He now adds defense tech to that list with Sapphire's investment in Defense Unicorns. And so, Rob, Jay, welcome both to the Pair Program.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Tim.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tim and Sean. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. All right, let's dive into the first segment here. It's a fun little icebreaker we call Pair Me Up. go around the room, rattle off two things that go together. Sean, you lead us off. What do you got?
Well, Tim, I've tried to stay topical. Once again, this has been a pretty good strategy for me for our past couple episodes. But my pair today is government software approval processes, ATO processes, and headache medication. So, if you're a new defense tech founder and you're getting your software product approved the first time, go out to Costco and get yourself the extra strength Excedrin, because it's going to be painful, but maybe not so much in the future because of the efforts of folks like Defense Unicorns. But that's my pair for today.
Yeah, I love it. And we're going to add Excedrin as one of our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Extreme Pain Relief. But yeah, man, I mean, it's a common theme. It takes somebody with some super thick skin to get into this space. We talk to founders all the time on this podcast. And so it's always intriguing to hear everyone's kind of why, they're jumping into that space. And I'm excited to hear it from a VC perspective too. But yeah, man, I think everybody on this episode will agree with you and a lot of our listeners as well. All right, I'll go next. Very off topic pairing for me. I've got deep conversations and total discomfort. And so I'll explain. I just joined a new gym, and one of my main motivations was that it has a sauna. And it's only been a week, but I've quickly realized that the sauna is kind of like this modern day barbershop. So it's a bunch of guys chatting, sports, could be politics, life advice, but the difference is everyone's half naked and dripping in sweat. And it's the only place that you'll find that you'll get kind of like unsolicited life advice from a stranger in a towel. I think it's so odd, but that's the pairing that I'm going with. It's these deep conversations and just totally discomfortable. That will be my pairing for today. Again, nothing to do with today's topic, just very top of mind because just joined this gym. But let's pass it around. Rob, again, welcome to the show and your pairing for today.
Yeah, well, Sean stole mine, so I'm gonna have to go with my number 2 pick here. So honestly, for me, I got 4 kids. The youngest one is 18 months. And starting a company, you're always put in long hours. And years ago, I used to be one of those people that started my second shift around 9 p.m. and then worked my way to 3 and 4 a.m. mornings. Now I do the opposite, and I try to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning. And so for me, it's just coffee. Keep it simple. Coffee and mornings go in together. It's the only time I get clear headspace. Try to wake up before anyone else gets up. Try to start the day before anyone else does, so you can kind of start off fresh, close out anything before the day starts, and honestly do my best thinking, just right there, normally typically between, 4 and 5 a.m.
Yeah, even you got to have some rocket fuel coffee at 4 a.m., I'd say. What time are you going to bed? That's my follow-up question to you.
I mean, late nights for me is typically getting close to 11 now. So, but I'd say, earlier and earlier, the older I get. Certainly not unusual for me to be in bed by 10.
And how many kids do you have?
4.
Wow. Yeah.
Unless the Suns are playing, right?
I stay up, especially if they play, the Warriors on Pacific time, and then I got to stay up late.
Oh yeah.
Priorities.
Yeah, that's right. You're out in Phoenix, right? Is that right?
Yeah, out in Phoenix, which is as of a couple days ago back on Mountain Time.
Very nice, very nice. Well, yeah, kudos to you for being able to set that alarm and get up at 4 a.m. I was proud of myself for doing like 5:30, 5:45, but man, that's early. It's an early start. But you're right though. I mean, it's the only time you're going to get that kind of mental clarity, that silence before the house is just full of chatter and kids romping around. So good on you. Jay, quick pairing from you.
Yeah. So, I'll go with one tried and true and then one around venture. So, of course, the tried and true is pizza and beer, right? You can't have pizza without
Classic.
Nice.
Classic.
But from my experience in venture, I think the things that go together is if you have consensus, like everybody voting one on a deal, that deal is not going to do well. It's a very interesting phenomena, like in our business, that when everybody thinks it's a great deal, for whatever reason, statistically we have seen that invariably it actually becomes a terrible deal over time.
Wow.
So contrarian deals, actually the ones that you have the most amount of discussion and most amount of debate, are the ones actually that turn out to be great ones, including defensive cards.
That's fascinating. I'm trying to think about some other things that I relate this to. Is I'm a big fan of NFL. So anytime in the pregame, right? All of the analysts are giving their picks, right? And whenever it's all across the board, everybody's going the same team. It's usually the other team that wins, and it's like one of those spoilers.
And it just means that in venture you kind of have to be contrarian a little bit, and step out of the normal bounds of what people are talking about, because when people are all talking about the same investment, it's typically means that there is no alpha left in that company, right? To really outperform the mean and be a really big company. So that's kind of in our what we have seen from our experience, and when we track all the records of the voting for all our deals.
That's cool. Yeah, it's great perspective. And then I got to ask, favorite pizza topping. What are you going with on the pizza?
It's pepperoni.
Yeah, that's right. That's the best. It's just a staple, classic.
That's
Can't
right.
go wrong.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, guys. Good pairings all around. Let's get into it. So, the way that I kind of see this conversation flowing is I want to make sure that we define the problem set, kind of talk through how Defense Unicorns is approaching, that's their solution. Spend some time talking through the investment that Sapphire made in Defense Unicorns. Kind of given that the uniqueness that it was the first defense investment that the firm made. And then we'll kind of close just kind of riffing a little bit about open source and the future of national security. Rob, I'm sure you're going to have some great insights on that. So I'll start with you, Rob. Let's kind of start at that problem set. What did you see was this big challenge across defense IT?
Yeah. So, the way I like to explain it is actually, to take like a super step back. And so, for folks that are, around my age, which I just turned about 40, there was a time when you just managed your own software. If you wanted to buy a game, you wanted to install something on your machine, you quite literally went to the store, and you got a CD, or a DVD or something, and you put it on your device and you installed it yourself. And over the course of years, that became obviously logistically complex and over complex and very restrictive. And so people really moved to this more centralized dynamic, centralized infrastructure. And then they started to run into these strong desires to optimize, because they didn't want the users to have to even worry about it. They wanted to be able to just update their systems when they felt that it was required. They wanted to just patch and fix bugs in the background so nobody would notice it. And these systems and these solutions just grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And ultimately they came to this point to where orchestration and things like cloud costs and availability became their dominant concern. And so really, talking about these, tech giants. So, it's Google, it's Amazon, it's companies like Netflix that are dealing with these millions upon millions of users that are running on this centralized infrastructure. And behind that came this entire wave of technology, really baselined off of Kubernetes and what people referred to as the cloud native space. And like I said, these systems were designed for a centralized mentality around infrastructure optimization. And now obviously it changed the world. And there are so many amazing things that technology and that entire community brought to life that we as Americans enjoy today. It was a huge breakthrough, and it was all the right decisions, to some degree, many or most of the right decisions, for the tech community, especially at the time. But the issue is that for the Department of War, it wasn't and isn't that great of a solution. And the reason is because complexity itself was never part of the dynamic. They never thought for a second, what if this is too complex? What level of engineering talent do you need to staff to make this successful? Because they had all the engineering talent in the world. And so here you had these tech giants developing this amazing world-changing technology. And it moved. And over the course of the last decade, it completely changed how we think about software. Meanwhile, the Department of War is still thinking like CDs, because that is their world. They are still thinking in that mentality. And so there's this huge issue. There's this huge tension around how the Department of War wants to support software and the realities of war and where the rest of the world kind of went. And so defense unicorns, what's the big idea? We saw, the Department of War was going to be faced with this crossroad. They were going to have to decide, do we effectively fork and run our own baseline different from basically the entire rest of the world? Or do we find a way to make Kubernetes work for us and find a way to make this cloud native technology ours and fully in line with how we want to run operations? And so my background, I was 13 years in the Air Force, and probably the number one thing they really beat into you from a mission operations perspective is centralized control and decentralized execution. And so really, defense unicorns, what's the big idea? Is we wanted to build technology that allowed for this decentralization of software, because it was at the edge in these deployed environments on these edge sensors and edge systems. Think fighters and tanks and submarines, that you were going to have this issue to where you had to consistently update and maintain your software. You're going to be compute limited. So you're going to have mission specific payloads, software specific missions capabilities that you're going to have to load. And you're going to actually have to get these operators, the actual active duty airmen and soldiers and sailors and Marines, to actually maintain these systems. And so where the rest of the world was saying, hey, we're going to hire some Google SRE and some amazing SRE and pay them $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year, and they'll be worth it because, we can afford that. The military had to figure out and has to figure out, how do we take that technology and get this young 20-year-old to actually maintain it? And oh, by the way, they can't actually get lost in the details. And ideally, they don't even have to learn what Kubernetes is. And so over the last 5 years, we developed a technology called UDS to literally do exactly that, which abstracts all of these complexities away and actually allows the airman and sailor and soldier and Marine to actually focus way more on war fighting than struggling with IT and software.
Yeah, I mean, that is a fantastic kind of like description analogy, right? I think everybody can relate to back in the day. You're just kind of burning CDs. Everything's kind of very simple. It got so complex, and so how do you kind of keep up? Sean, I think you had a lead off with that.
One of the keys I think there that I really kind of had a light bulb moment on was when Rob said centralized control and decentralized execution. That's for me a perfect like use case or theme for Kubernetes, right? And for a lot of these cloud-based toolings. But I wonder if you could share any insights or experience on working with the War Department of War, and relating that idea of centralized orchestration and decentralized execution. Do you find positive responses to that, or is that still kind of a mindset or paradigm shift? What have you experienced there?
Yeah, I think for operationally, it clicks. People get it, but they're really not used to thinking about that from a software perspective. And I'll give you an example. One of our customers, and I'm not going to name the asset, but one of our customers is some form of a stealth fighter. And this particular fighter does these software updates typically once a year, maybe once every other year. And every time it does the update, it actually has to go into depot maintenance. And so here it is, an asset that you have to basically take out of the fight for weeks to sometimes even months at a time to basically do this quote update to then return it back out to the field for operations. And the other thing that you realize, being active duty again, is those assets, when they actually go on a mission, they go through mission planning phases and they decide really what munitions they load. And so to give you the example, if you're say at F-22, your air-to-air munitions is going to be for an air-to-air mission. And so if you're flying an air-to-air mission, you're going to have air-to-air missiles. If you're flying an air-to-ground mission, you're going to have air-to-ground munitions. And if you're flying an intelligence mission, you're going to be outfitted with sensors, because people understand that you can't load everything at once. So you may have this like centralized plan of, oh, by the way, the F-22 can load these missiles and it can load these bombs and it can load these sensors. But it's actually the decentralized squadrons that are making the decisions of what to load per mission. Okay. And so, but people don't think about that at the software layer. They think, oh, you just load the software, you load it once every other year, and then you forget about it and you just hope it runs and it's fine. With the advances of AI, I think people are realizing like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to go to war with AI from 4 years ago. We're going to get our butts kicked. And even more so, AI is compute and memory hogs. My gosh, they're just gigantic. And so if you actually think about it, if you're actually conducting a mission with these assets, that air-to-air mission probably has an air-to-air AI assistant that is going to be way more capable for that air-to-air engagement than it would an air-to-ground engagement. And it's probably totally different for an intelligence mission. And so from a software perspective, you have to actually convey that, oh my gosh, these operators need the ability to install the software they need on demand. And it's not going to be this like one and done type approach. You're going to have to quite literally load the software per mission that they get. Once they understand what you're actually trying to do, they may not understand what, decentralization of software is actually providing for them. But if you could actually tell them, hey, your pilots, your mission planners, your actual airmen have the ability to load software specific capabilities, that clicks.
I think that's such an interesting way to look at it, and unifying, software deployment orchestration all the way down to that mission tactical level. I'm gonna hold on to that for something that we'll probably circle back to later on in this conversation. But I want to pivot it back to Tim to make sure that we're staying on task here. But a really interesting stuff there when you're thinking about software as an asset, and not just the stuff that kind of runs in the background of these more traditional assets, like you said, fighters, submarines, tanks, what have you. So thank you, Rob.
Yeah, we're going to pull in those threads for sure. But I want to make sure that we loop in Jay's perspective on all of this. So Jay, when you kind of first saw this unique approach and kind of heard Rob's description of UDS, what kind of clicked for you? I'm curious if it felt familiar from stuff that you'd seen with enterprise DevOps, or something entirely different.
Yeah. No, look, I've been involved with open source for the longest time. Like when I started out as a developer, I spent a lot of time, with all the GNU compilers. Like I worked on GCC, which was done by Free Software Foundation by Richard Stallman, which was a precursor to open source. And then our firm actually invested all the way from the beginning in open source in Red Hat, and then of course MySQL. There used to be the stack called Red Hat, Apache, MySQL, and the Python like Zen, right? So, and we didn't invest in Apache, but we were invested in all the other three. And we have been very successful in investing in open source. So we had MuleSoft, we had JFrog, all of these in Red Hat and MySQL, of course. So we were always fundamentally really big believers in open source software, right? And the way that you look at the community, the way that how you can, leverage the community to build great software and make it, more secure, more reliable, all of that stuff made a lot of sense. And then I actually met Rob and Jeff when they were part of Platform One, because one of my other open source company was part of the Platform One stack. And, when Platform One they talked about it, I was like, wow, I think that makes a lot of sense for the Department of War and the Air Force. I think Platform One was focused really on the Air Force at that time, to building something based on open source. And the thought did come to me: why isn't there a company doing that? Because I know enough about Red Hat to know that they're not really an open source company anymore, right? They kind of have become much more of an aggregator of open source software, to the point with with Kubernetes, what they have done with OpenShift. It's a great business, but they kind of are not an open source company anymore. So yeah, as soon as I heard that that they had left, and people, of course, in the venture community talk about it, like what's going on, what are the hot companies, and Defense Unicorn started coming up saying, hey, in the infrastructure space, there's this company that's doing well. And we had to break in. Like I even though I had known Rob, he did not respond to our first few emails to kind of say connect. So it took us a while.
Playing hard to get, Rob.
In my defense, Jay had the wrong email. Luckily, Jeff, who also serves as our IT function sometimes, was like, hey, this keeps showing up in the junk folder. I think we know Jay. And then he was like, oh, I was like, oh, Jay, this is great. Yeah, let's talk.
Yeah.
I love it.
No. But then, as you kind of talk to Rob and what you needed, all of the stuff that they had built, especially for all of our the assets on the edge, it made like perfect sense. And I was like, why hasn't this been done before? And what you always realize when entrepreneurs start companies, they usually are working in something that they realize needs to be solved and is not getting solved by outside vendors or whoever is kind of tasked with doing that. And so it was like classic entrepreneurship 101 that Rob and Jeff saw this happening and saw the need for this and realized that they would, and Rob can go on about how he would, hire all these great developers and programmers into Platform One, and all of a sudden they would be recruited or go somewhere else. So you really couldn't actually build a company within the DOW because, the incentives are not aligned. And the way the DOW works, it's very much focused on the military's kind of, what their main objective is, and that's not building software. So yeah, so as soon as we started chatting, I was like, yeah, we got to invest in this company because, we realized that we have a lot of experience in open source software. We didn't have a lot of experience in companies selling into DOW. But on the other hand, we could help them in figuring out how to build an open source company.
I want to ask what the timeline was from when you left Platform One and started Defense Unicorns, because, from the research that I had done is that you had bootstrapped to nearly 30 million in revenue. So one, I'm curious, how quickly were you able to do that? Because that's phenomenal. And then two, I have to imagine, Jay, that gave you extra conviction of like, all right, there's something happening here. So how much time did it take you to get to that point in revenue?
Yeah, it took us 3 years. And for context, this will mean nothing to the defense folks, but the software folks will understand this. The 30 million in revenue was $20 million of what's known as quote ARR. So it's like 20 million of what I'll call really, really great software revenue. And then 10 million of additional services. Because to bootstrap, we had to do services work. And the reason we had to bootstrap was because, I left the Air Force. I was a major. Jeff left. He was a master sergeant. We actually tried to raise a seed round. And pretty much everyone kind of just laughed at us. We weren't from Google. We didn't have, in my opinion, very fancy resumes. Everyone was kind of like, who are these two? What the heck are they doing? And honestly, we took a couple calls and, not a ton, but probably about a dozen or so calls with firms that do pre-seeds and seeds and, kind of just got laughed out of the room. And at a certain point, I remember talking to Jeff, and I was like, I would rather talk to like our mission heroes and our customers and find a way. Like it is so much easier to solve their problems, that they have certainly enough money, and along the way we can build what we're trying to build, and so we can both give them value, take those contracts, and in the entire time build up to what we ultimately want to build together. And so we started, totally bootstrapped, and we took a lot of services contracts. We worked across not just the Department of War, but we also worked with Medicaid, Medicare. We worked with FDIC. It was really important for us to also take commercial deals, because, I thought at the time, I was like, I want really good perspective. I don't want to be, is quote defense, is that a lower bar? And so it was really important for us to work commercial as well, to just kind of prove it. And after about a year or two, we were kind of like, hey, I think we can do it. Like I saw the talent we were bringing in. Like, we're, for context, like today we're top 15 worldwide in terms of Kubernetes contributions. Next to folks like Apple and NVIDIA. And, why does that matter? It's because, like, if we had to build this product in the background, you had to actually go and start recruiting elite talent. And so we started doing that over the course of years. And after a year or two, you kind of, like I said, you look around and say, I would take this company and Defense Unicorns and put them head to head to any company on the planet in the cloud native space. And not only would it be hold our own, but I would say from a quote density perspective, talent density, not only are we best in the world, not only are we best in defense, but I actually think we're best in the world. And it took that level of talent to really just build the things that we're constantly building. And of course, what did our customers see? Well, they saw that when they gave us $1, they got $10 of value. So then they gave us $10 to see if they could get $100 of value, and then the revenue started growing. And then fast forward to the Series A, we obviously had great revenue, great growth, and I think most importantly, even though we were open source, we were turning profit, and that's huge, because most of the time, open source companies, they start off, quote free and open, and then 5 years later they have to figure out how to make money, and then they start changing the rules on people and they start rug pulling, and it is really hard to run an open source company. It's so challenging. But, because we were bootstrapped, we never had the option of not making money. We had to figure out how to make money first. And then in the background, we built this amazing, open source product that we truly do believe will be 100% distributed and running on every defense system, in the US military.
So
Go ahead.
can I jump in here, Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rob, you kind of gave me another light bulb moment there. When you're talking about folks who work in, defense or intelligence or anything sort of national mission oriented, they're obviously not just doing it for a salary and a paycheck. They have kind of a mission motivation behind it. But now there's this new dimension, I think, that you probably have some great insight into on what makes an open source, what makes an engineer or a data scientist or platform engineer, what makes them gravitate towards doing open source work? Because that's definitely sort of a non-traditional way of thinking about a career in, software engineering. So what have you found? What kind of motivates these folks that you've seen?
I think most engineers love open source because most of the time they're using open source stuff. So I'd say 90% of engineers love to and want to work on open source projects. And then you have kind of a spectrum of purists. Meaning like how committed are you to 100% open source versus say 90%, because for us, as a company, we started out at 100%. Right now we have more of an open core model where it's like 90 to 95% of it is fully open source. And then there's this 5% that's still behind like a premium license. And that was a big decision for us. That was hard because we had a lot of, in a very very good way, open source purists, which both myself and my co-founder Jeff consider ourselves to be this open source purist. So it's really hard to get there, but you have to really understand why. And for me, to me, I think there's a ton of similarities between what makes me love the US and what makes me love open source. And it's at the end of the day, it's about independence. Independence from a country perspective. That's what makes me love America. And then you have data independence from a software perspective. Why do people love open source? It's because they love freedom and independence. And so to me, these two things, I should have started with this. This is a better two things that go together. It's
America and open source.
You have open source connected to US military. And like I said, the same reason that I love America is the same reason why I love open source. It's because I don't want someone telling me what to do. I don't want somebody to lock me in. I want to always maintain a choice. I want to make sure that I have freedom and independence to choose my own path ahead of me. The same things. And like I said, I think one of the reasons I really wanted to work with Jay and Sapphire, and the number one thing I was worried about in our Series A was, hey, we're going to have someone else other than us at the table, another investor. And what was so important to us is that this open source nature of the company was part of the business model. It was part of our core ethos. It was part of our value proposition. And you could never separate it. And so what really made it like I would say our number one concern was that we're going to bring an investor to the table. And after 6 or 18 months or something, they were going to say, hey, we think you should close source your product. Jay is like a legend in the VC community. And oh, by the way, all of his like most successful startups were mostly open source. So it was like a very natural fit for us because we knew if Jay was going to give us advice, it wasn't going to be based off like made up nonsense. It was going to be structured on just his experience in working with open source companies. And there wasn't going to be this like, forced kind of change from what the company wanted to do from an open source perspective.
So Jay, same question, but different version, which is, as Rob just said, you're a legend for your open source investments and very successful ones. How do you find an open source company potential investment that or you have high confidence is going to work out? What are those key elements? Because I'm sure now you probably get pitched on a lot of open source deals or potential deals that you pass on because they don't have the right ingredients. So what makes something like Defense Unicorn stand out?
So Rob, first of all, thanks for the kind words. And the other thing I will say is that, you did it the classic way that software companies used to be built. If you go back in history, Oracle was built on services, Informatica was built on services, even Microsoft was actually built on services. They built DOS for IBM, right? So you actually created this software. These new entrepreneurs don't understand how to build software companies, right? But from our perspective, when people pitch open source, I think there are a lot more tools nowadays to understand open source companies, right? And you look at the number of forks, the number of stars, all of that stuff. And what has happened, unfortunately, is that now people have figured out how to game the system, right? Because there is a lot of activity, people investing in open source software. We are not the only one, right? A bunch of firms invest in open source software. And the people trying to raise money know how to game the system. So for me, to this day, first and foremost, I will go and talk to the customers, right? Like even if they're not paying customers, you really have to, and so you have to figure out either through LinkedIn or through some of the expert networks is who's using the open source product, why do they use it, what do they like about it, and so we spend a lot of time talking to developers, and that's the way that we figure out whether that open source software is actually has product market fit and there's customer pull. And then I also spend a lot of time talking to the entrepreneur and the people behind these projects, right? Because there are some people, who are behind these projects and they have a kind of I wouldn't say a cushy job, but they have a job that is paying them well enough that they don't have the desire to go in and kind of create a company around open source, right? And they don't all sometimes even have the vision, right? Because that's the other thing, right? You can have a project that may be useful, but if you start a company, you also have to realize how are you going to actually build a business around it. and some of it can be just support. It can be services. They're different business models. So we're not really hung up on the business model, but you really need that entrepreneur to have the drive to say that, hey, I've built something that seems to have a lot of traction and I want to scale it up. And to scale it up and get more adoption, you have to create revenue. You have to get some investment maybe to help you scale up. So if the entrepreneur or the person behind the project doesn't have that drive, that for me is the single biggest criteria, right? Because then I'm not going to be able to make that person stay up late at night and work like crazy, like Rob and Jeff does, and get these things done or make the hard decisions, right? There's in the journey of being an entrepreneur, there are lots and lots of hard decisions you have to make. And, and you don't know whether these entrepreneurs or these people behind these projects are willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kudos to the pair program for finding the perfect pairing of folks. I can't say kudos to us, Rob. You were the one that's like, you got to bring Jay on. So, so I got to give you the credit there. But yeah, I just think it's like this perfect marriage between a venture partner that you trust and a company that's trying to break through and making sure, like I think it's so key that you honed in on making sure like. They weren't going to alter the direction of like where this company wanted to go, and having that trust is so key between investor and founder. But I want to quickly kind of lean a little bit deeper into the defense deal that was made because it was unique and it was the first, Jay. So, I imagine you had been pitched previously by some other defense companies and you were maybe just kind of waiting for that right one to hit you. But so why this company? And then, talk about the timing of it. Why now? What were these things that made, gave you that conviction? Like this is the first one that we need to make.
Yeah, I think it started with Platform One because once I started looking into, the spend that the DOW has, it's like $1 trillion in software spend, right? And you look around it and then you go and say that, oh my God, the people who are selling this stuff, these primes, they have like, it's all about body shopping almost, right? Like they're building custom software over and over again. And they charge by the number of, seats, by the number of hours. And this didn't make any sense. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about this problem. And then, Defense Unicorn kind of popped up. And then I think, some of the customers that Rob introduced me to, some of the early adopters, I think the way they were raving about the product and how good it was and how much it solved a lot of their problems, that's when you know that when there is so much customer love, you got to invest in those companies, right? Because over and over again, if you build something and nobody wants to buy it, there's no point in investing or and putting a lot of resources behind that company. But I think that's what kind of swayed me for sure, and then I had to kind of convince my partnership to kind of focus on the recommendations and the feedback and the review that was coming back for what Defense Unicorns had built. And look, there are some fundamental issues in when you sell to the U.S. military, where the way they buy, they procure is very different than enterprises, right? And I think that is a fundamental challenge that I had to overcome. I'm sure Rob will attest to that. He probably had to overcome with a lot of investors that, hey, this is a repeatable business. This is a business that once you get in, especially, with the type of sellers that Rob has recruited, which are mission heroes, which actually have worked within the military, who knows how to get these procurement done, all of these, contracts done. And that banner got me to convince, and it was still not a consensus decision. So there was definitely a lot of debate, a lot of, going back and forth. And it was like a 2-hour discussion for us to get through the whole debate.
I think that's such a great perspective to hear from a commercial first investor. And Rob, and also keep in mind, right? What was the year that this investment went down?
It was at the end of 2023. I think it officially closed in 2024 though, but it was like the
around
time period
Thanksgiving,
Jay
right?
was, yeah.
Yeah. And just, to be clear here, like things have just progressed so much quicker too in the last couple of years to where defense tech is having a moment, right? You're seeing this kind of conversion of a lot more investment getting dumped in, and for a lot of unfortunate reasons, right? There is a lot of unrest in the world. There's a lot of war happening right now, and so I think from a timing perspective, you're seeing a huge surge. But Rob, I do want to also kind of like get your flip side perspective on that. From you're probably how many pitches you've made before it was a fit here with Sapphire, and how did that kind of maybe change your perspective on how commercial VCs approach defense tech?
Well, what's really interesting is, as I mentioned, when we started the company, which was right out of the military, and just to give you context on that, really started Defense Unicorns to solve that exact problem that we've been discussing, which is just like software sucks on these weapon systems, and every weapon system is going to be a software intensive system. So the fact that you have IT and these IT issues, and I don't know if you guys remember the whole Air Force campaign around quote fix our computers that was super popular like 1 or 2 years ago. Like myself and Jeff and the Defense Unicorns team, we saw it as like it's very soon going to be like fix our submarines, because those submarines are IT systems, and those next generation stealth aircraft are IT systems. So, we really, as you mentioned, my background before this was Platform One, but before that I did Space Camp. Before that I did something else. Jeff was the original engineer on Kessel Run. So like we had been trying to solve this problem for about a decade, jumping PCS cycle to PCS cycle, just starting new things. And so we felt like all of it was good ROI to start, and then they all failed to scale. And they all failed to scale because the technology wasn't there. And so when we were pitching this, as I mentioned, nobody took it seriously. Everyone was like, who are these two? What the heck is going on here? And so it was no. Fast forward a couple of years, there's almost no companies that bootstrapped the revenues we did. And actually, I did a database search and was like, okay, how many companies like bootstrapped to 30 million? And then how many companies was able to go from 0 to 30 million without like VC backing? And at the time, AI is, I'm sure, changed this, but when we raised, there was none. There was like a couple companies that could go from 0 to 30, and there was a couple companies that went from 0 to 30 as fast as us, but there was no company in the history of the United States other than Defense Unicorns that did both when we took the investment. So at that point, it was easy to raise. Obviously we had to get through due diligence, but we had investors calling us. We only took calls when they reached out to us. We had investors tell us that they've been trying to get a hold of us for the last year, and they couldn't because I'm not super responsive on email. And so at that point we were kind of a hot commodity, but it was because we had a great business. And I think that's why the venture community is really interested in defense tech in general. Like if you look at NVIDIA, the largest company in the world, and you look at how much revenue they're pulling in, and then you compare that to defense systems, what you realize is there's actually several NVIDIAs in that market. But you don't see that in the defense tech companies. And the reason you don't is because their gross profit margins are out of whack. And so if you look at a traditional prime, their gross profit margins are about 10%, which is abysmal. It's like almost crazy that any of them make any money, but it's because what's in part of that cost of goods sold is like everything. And so they charge the government for everything, but then they make very small profit. But if you look at the new wave of defense technologies, it's like, hey, you need to fix price your work. You need larger gross profit margins. We're going to give you more bang for the dollar, but then you're allowed those gross profit margin increases. That allows those companies to be worth more. And so I think you have two things going on. You see, the nature of warfare changing. You see it becoming more software intensive. You see, Russia and Ukraine and how advanced those engagements have become. And then on the other side of it, it's like, oh, there's a business case here. And if you were to take the, $2.5 trillion of international military spend and take the large, big chunk of that and make that higher gross profit margin work, all of a sudden, once again, you have, to give you real numbers, you have 5 NVIDIAs in just the existing defense budget. Like I said, you don't have 5 NVIDIAs worth of publicly traded defense companies. And so to me, I think people are coming around to this now that they see companies are able to take that same dollar, give $10 of value, but somehow still have larger gross profit margins. And I think that it's a perfect storm of a great mission case, which is what got me involved in this in the first place. But along the way, you also realize that, oh my gosh, these are also great businesses.
But I would also add, Rob, I do think that people in the military, in the DOW, they are also actually changing. The more I talk to them, they kind of realize is that, hey, why are we giving all of these defense primes, all of these existing companies, these seats kind of based, like a way of just charging the government everything and not providing me, larger amount of value for what I'm paying for them, which a commercial enterprise would do. So I think there is also that. So, to do that, you also have to change the way you procure, the way you kind of evaluate companies. I think, it's a slow process, right? It's a huge, huge organization, and I don't think it's going to change in a day. But I think there's also inklings within the US military that, hey, we need to improve the way we purchase software, we purchase systems, all of that stuff, and, make it more efficient.
Yeah, and on our podcast and our kind of community at large, we're very dialed into the critical infrastructure vertical. So we're just kind of talking about defense and national security here, but we see it as well bleeding into Department of Energy. You see it. You see a ton of it in space tech too. I mean, with the acceleration of how many more satellites are getting launched into space on a daily basis, the amount of opportunity that then creates on the back end for new startups to come and satellite navigation and refueling, this or that. It's really wild on how fast that area is accelerated. And you see it in defense and you see it in energy and all these other areas where, now we're trying to play catch up because the technology has gotten so advanced so quickly.
Well, there's another thing, I'll say about the US, right? This entrepreneurship, it's freedom. But I think that is the single one biggest kind of advantage that the US has. And, and that is where when people find a need, the way the US, system works, that you can have entrepreneurs come in and build these things and, and benefit both the country or, whatever they need to solve the problem that needs to be solved, but also get rewarded for it. Right. And that is very, very unique about the US. And I think that's what you're seeing here, right? Like people have identified the need. People have realized that, hey, it can't be solved by the existing providers. And now the entrepreneurs are jumping in. And of course, the VCs are also and investors are also kind of following them. And I think it's a win-win. I think all of these things will get developed a lot faster than people were probably thinking, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to dive deeper into some of this. I want to make sure that we save a little bit of time for this final segment because we have some fun with it, the 5-second scramble. But before we do that, one last kind of thing that I just wanted to make sure that we got a little clarity on specifically from you, Rob, was, some of these open source projects like Zarf, Lula, and Pepper. Can you give the quick hitters on each of those and the challenges that those are solving?
Yeah. So the way I'll describe it is a lot of people, when they think about software problems, they'll sometimes really associate that with an ATO problem. And a lot of people will be just like, and we even had a discussion just prior to starting here on, like ATO acceleration and honestly, Sean, your headache analogy of how big of a headache it is to get an ATO. But really, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's what people see. And so that's, they're driving on their boats and they look out and they see that tip of the iceberg. But under the iceberg is all of this other complexity and issues that make it hard to get the ATO. And it's, what I'll call the ATO plus. And really those open source projects are us attacking specific challenges both on top of that iceberg and then beneath it under the surface that makes the entire software delivery lifecycle really challenging. And so the first thing that I'll talk about is the air gap challenge, which we specifically developed ZAR for, which has now become the most widely used air gap tool on the planet. And so it's an open source project now donated to Foundation. And literally everyone from people who launch rockets to oil rigs to when you go through the TSA gate, all those people are using ZARF, including, obviously national security systems. But it was just us observing that, hey, air gap is challenging and nobody built a tool to just make it easy. And that's where ZARF came from. Pepper, the real challenge we tried to solve was complexity in the stack and ease of integration. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to take this solution and that solution and another solution built in with all of this complexity around policy and cybersecurity and get all three of these things to integrate together. And so we developed Pepper to solve that real integration challenge. And then Lula, it was really about saying that, hey, everybody's compliance is stuck in these Excel spreadsheets. It doesn't actually map to the system at all. How do you actually develop this concept of like compliance as code? So that way people know when they're actually leveraging and making changes to the system, they actually have key insights into that, that thing that ultimately gives you your ATO. Because our observation was, all these systems that have ATOs, whatever's in that ATO document has almost nothing in common with actually what's running in production. And that was our repeat observation is like everybody keeps talking about the ATO, the ATO, the ATO. When you actually go look up the actual ATO documents yourself, and then once again, you look at actually what's running, you're like, these two do not map at all. It's like, this is so outdated. This is so changed. And so, like I said, these are three slivers getting after different segments of that iceberg. And we wrap it all together. And ultimately what we provide as UDS, which uses those three tools as kind of like the basic building blocks of ultimately what we deploy. But it was really important for us not to just make UDS, obviously for ourselves, because UDS core is also open source, but let's also develop and then open source the tools that we ourselves use to also go build the product. So that way, if somebody wants to rebuild their own version of it, once again, you have that freedom, you have that independence to do it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. I mean, my mind keeps going to like, it's not freedom of speech, it's freedom of code, building in the States. Cool.
It's also, for Rob, it's just such a really excellent illustration of deep understanding of the problem. And back to Jay's point about entrepreneurship 101 and understanding that, an ATO report is a bunch of words on a page that may have some bearing on what the software is actually doing, but usually doesn't. And I'm getting flashbacks to POAMs and STIGs getting managed on Excel spreadsheets and traded back and forth on SharePoint. So, but like these are the things that make the DOW world go round. And if you can attack it systemically, like Defense Unicorns is doing, you really are talking about this market that's huge, and then it touches every piece of military equipment and the systems behind it. So all you want to be defense tech entrepreneurs out there, go and understand the problem deeply, to dive in deep, and then come out with some real insight, just the way Rob did.
And I think that the new entrepreneurs won't have as much of a problem as Rob and Jeff did.
Mm-hmm. Rob kind of paved the path,
Exactly. I think there's a lot more people looking to do seed and pre-seed in these kind of entrepreneurs.
Rob, you blazed the trail, man. Thank you for your service. It's the next wave of entrepreneurs need it.
That is very kind. I feel very fortunate and blessed to feel like I'm on the shoulders of other giants. Companies, got to be quite honest, companies like Palantir, companies like Anduril really set the scene. I don't see how a company like Defense Unicorns could get the same investment interests that we have historically and even do today without actually having those success stories. So like maybe we were second waves, hope to be continuing to accelerate, but like very much feel very blessed to be on the shoulders of giants ourselves, and, very, very, very fortunate.
Yeah. And I'll throw a shout out to Kessel Run. We've had a couple of alumni from there, like Enrique Oti and Brian Kroger on the show before. So I'm sure Jeff would appreciate it. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap with our final segment, the 5-second scramble. Quick answers. Give us your gut reaction. You won't get air horned off if you exceed your 5 seconds, but try to keep it brief. Sean, why don't you start with Jay, and then I'll close with Rob.
Absolutely. All right, Jay. These are going to start off a little hard, but then they're going to get easier as we go on. So, number one, what was your most unexpected? I really enjoyed that moment of your career.
I think my first IPO. This was exact target. It was, exact target. Scott Dorsey took the company public, and being there, that was definitely one of those moments where it's like, okay, this is something I want, I've never seen that, never thought I would see it, but, being part of that journey was great.
Outstanding. All right, number two, we always do our diligence here on the podcast, and we know that you have an electrical engineering degree from Brown for your undergrad days. What's a lesson from your electrical engineering undergrad days that you still rely on frequently?
Logical thinking, right? I think, in business, in everything in life, you kind of have to be very analytical and very logical about what steps you have to do before the first step, the second step to get to your ultimate goal. And I think that has been a lesson I learned. And realistically, although I was a double E, I actually could not deal with all the, breadboard and circuit board. So I actually became a CS major because my whole thing was like, hey, I can simulate this whole, circuit board in software. Why do I have to go sit there actually making this work? So I actually spend more time in the CS lab than in the WE lab.
I can see that after the 10th time that you mess up a transistor doing some bad soldering, you probably want to move along.
Exactly.
What's the best decision you've made under serious time pressure that wasn't the defense unicorns investment?
Good caveat.
Under time pressure, I think I'll go personal. I think kind of saying proposing to my wife because her mother-in-law, my mother-in-law, her mom was on my case in saying that, are you wasting your time dating her?
Great answer. Great answer.
Said no mother-in-law ever. Yeah.
All right. So Jay, we're past the hard ones. These should be a little bit easier. You're crushing them so far. What's something random that you're surprisingly good at that has nothing to do with work?
I think it kind of helps me with work, but I'm good at arguing and debating to the point where, where my colleagues have sometimes said that I can actually argue with myself.
It's the ultimate chess game against yourself.
That's awesome.
That's right.
All right. One book or a movie or an article, podcast even, that you enjoy, but that you might not recommend. Basically, what's a guilty pleasure of yours?
What I would not recommend, that's a hard one. I would actually, I've not listened to enough of your podcast, but I do like the Acquired podcast. I don't know if you guys know about them.
Yeah.
Not to kind of give a shout out to another competing podcast, maybe. that is something. I'm sorry about that. And you can cut this out.
Well, now you've got to listen to some more episodes, Jay.
Yes, I will.
No, so this goes back to Jay arguing with himself. What that actually was a recommendation for more of the pair program.
Exactly. That's sometimes. That's saw me work.
I've listened to Acquired. It's a good one. I also used to love How I Built This. A good one too.
All right, down to the last two, Jay. What's your favorite everyday piece of technology that isn't a smartphone or a laptop?
That's probably my Kindle.
Oh, good one.
Right. I do read a lot, and so Kindles, has made it really easy to have a huge library and carry it around.
Absolutely. That's my go-to for long flights. You can just pop that Kindle open and kind of, get after it. All right, and our last question is always the same on the podcast. What is a charity or a philanthropic organization that's near and dear to your heart that you want people to be aware of?
Yeah, I do support this thing out of India where there's called Pratham that really focuses on education for the people who don't have resources. So we do work a lot, and they do actually try. They use education and you use a lot of data actually to collect data to make sure that whatever programs is working or not working, and they actually are spreading to different parts of the world also.
Outstanding.
Yeah, we'll get a link for that to promote as well in the show notes when we put the episode live.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome, great answers, Jay. Rob, you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. If defense unicorns were a band, what genre would you play?
I'd say EDM because it's always entertaining, high tempo with sudden changes.
I see EDM when I look at the unicorn, honestly.
Rob, I didn't know you were an EDM fan.
The younger version of me was probably an EDM fan.
That unicorn has an EDM look to it. A little swoop over on the hair, for sure. I see it.
That's a new one. Okay, we got a lot to talk about. Okay.
Yeah, this is another episode forming. We'll talk about Jay's EDM and Rob's interest. All right. What's the most critical roles that you guys are hiring for in the next 3 to 6 months?
I would say always on the product side, but a lot of new sales and growth roles as well. It is so hard to sell in this market because you need to understand the mission, you need to understand sales, and then you also need to understand technology. So it is very, very, very hard to find the right people. And then we are always hiring for product and trying to just get the best product engineers in the world. And that is hard. It's getting easier though, because a lot of the best engineers in the world, this might surprise, but maybe doesn't surprise people. A lot of them don't want to work on defense systems. They're afraid to write code that supports military systems, but that's changed a lot in like the last couple of years. And then especially because, Defense Unicorns has done such a great job in the open source community, it is becoming more and more familiar. So there is, that side of it is actually every single month, every single year, the challenge to recruit top talent gets easier and easier.
Yeah, that brand recognition has got to help. What's one of your favorite parts about the culture that you guys are building at Defense Unicorns?
First and foremost, mission focused. So, to me, we didn't start Defense Unicorns because we really even wanted to start a company. We started Defense Unicorns because we're trying to solve a problem. We're trying to solve something that pissed us off, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. It was like, why do we, because I actually got into the platform layer, started, platform one because I was trying to deploy software myself for the units that I supported, and we couldn't because of all these platform things. And so, to me, the mission is the mission. This is not a market to us. Like sometimes when people are like, hey, we want to get in the defense market, I cringe a little bit because it's like, to the people in this quote market, it's not a market. It's your way of life. It's what you believe in. And to me, like, you see that every day. Every unicorn we hire knows why they're there. They know why they're working. Not only is it prevalent or, across the entire company, but my hope is 10, 20, 50 years from now, that same statement is still true.
Yeah. And quick plug on, is it fully remote company?
Fully remote. We do have a couple offices, Colorado Springs, small office, San Antonio, Phoenix, and DC.
Cool. Who's one person that's had a massive influence on your career?
That is a great question. Honestly, I would say all of the great entrepreneurs. So, we're talking about podcasts. So I'll throw out the Founder series, which dissects a lot of the, great founders over the years. So, obviously Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, but you just go and talk to, these companies that have these founders that just sit on the company for like 4 decades. And I would say that what's really interesting is the entrepreneurs and everyone that I admire, they've all built things, like I said, over the course of several decades. And so those are the founders I love hearing from. My background's physics and military. Yet when I think about companies, like I strive to build a company that, somebody like Warren Buffett would blush over reading the Excel documents and the financial statements. And it's because, as an entrepreneur, I'm literally just trying to study from and learn from the best. And so I don't think it's any one person, but probably a collection of the history's greatest 200 founders. And then just trying to go deeper on each and every one of those, because, I would say that most of the people I admire are already have died because they created companies 150 years ago. And I'm trying to study their playbooks back when the latest and greatest technology was like railroads. And so, those are the things that, really, really get me excited. Really, really love the concept of, understanding where the technology and the direction of technology is going. And how do you build a company that can survive generations?
Very cool. Favorite place to travel for personal fun?
I love to go to San Diego. I live in Phoenix. My kids love the beach. So I'd say probably 2 or 3 times a year, the family and me gets out to the beach there. Typically in between, San Diego and LA.
Yeah, San Diego, perfect weather year round. Finish this sentence. The future of defense software runs on blank.
UDS.
Well played. So perfectly teed up for you. I was threw you a softball.
Yeah, that's perfect.
You're an Air Force vet. What's a lesson from your service that still applies to you as a founder?
And I'm going to say one that maybe the Air Force didn't necessarily execute well, but at least tried to, which is, mission first, people always. The people are what makes the mission successful, and you got to find the right balance there. And I do think the mission does come first, but at the same time, as mentioned earlier in the podcast, I got 4 kids. I got a balanced life. I got to, figure out how to make the, defense unicorns in the company and the mission successful, while at the same time recognizing that everybody who's building this great thing with me also has their own problems, their own family, their own interest. And so you gotta find the right balance there and make sure that you're also taking care of people.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great tagline. What's a totally non-tech hobby or skill that you've picked up?
I would say 4 kids in a startup. I don't have hobbies. But one of my hidden secrets that only my kids and wife know about that I will not impersonate for you is I am really good with voices. So I am constantly pretending to be somebody else in the house and doing different voices. It gets my kids and wife laughing hysterically, but I refuse to do it outside of the home.
Yeah, we won't put you on the spot. I think everybody kind of has something like that. We do that with our kid, our dog. Like we have little voices that we use for them all too. Exactly. Last one. What's a charity or cause that's near and dear to you?
Yeah, so I am a huge local church fan, and so my local church, CCV, is near and dear to my heart. But I think everyone's local church, your faith has to go, in front of in front of anything else you do. And so I'm a huge community person. I'm a huge there's a why behind the why type person. And I think if you're well grounded in that, and I think it really keeps you aligned. It keeps your ego in check. And I think it allows you to see the world through a better lens and better perspective that I think ultimately benefits everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, well said. And I personally have to ask one quick bonus question. Does the unicorn have a name?
The unicorn is called Doug.
Doug?
So, we have Doug on, one side of my shoulder. And then with the Department of War, we have War Doug on the other side, which is his alternative ego. that we are leaning into and, you know, trying to support.
My best friend, Doug. I love it. That's great. All right. I had to ask because I've got my business is, you know, we've got like a little egg guy here, and everybody's like, what's its name? Company's name is Hatch. So his name's Hatchy, obviously. That's a wrap, guys. Just wanted to thank you for joining us on an awesome conversation. You know, it's inspiring to kind of see the story unfold and see how both sides kind of were in it together, taking risk on one another for an end goal to, you know, to modernize the systems that keep our country secure. So thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for the work that you're doing, and appreciate you being on the pair program.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having us. Yeah, thank you so much.